Tennessee loves to show off the Smoky Mountains in the mist, country music, family diners, and that take one loop and you'll feel calm vibe. But right behind that postcard layer is 10 creepiest small towns in Tennessee, where the eerie doesn't need ghosts, it just needs the truth. There's a town that was built like a secret, where people live next to fences and names that sound like code words. There's a resort neighborhood where time hit pause, cabins still standing, but the voices are gone. There's a prison fortress buried in the mountains, and there's a town you enter by a road that used to be railroad tracks. So pull your chair closer, because before you take a wrong turn on a dark back road, you should know exactly what you're driving into. Number 10. Oak Ridge. If you drove through Oak Ridge today, you might think it's just another calm Tennessee town. Quiet neighborhoods, pickup trucks, a high school football vibe, but Oak Ridge has a strange undertone. Like the ground remembers something the rest of the country pretends was just a history chapter, because Oak Ridge wasn't born naturally. It was built fast on purpose and behind control points. In 1942, the U.S. government carved a city out of the hills for one job: help win a war by pushing science into a place it had never gone before. People moved in by the tens of thousands, yet the outside world barely saw it. The nickname stuck for a reason: the Secret City. And here's where the creepiness hits. Not ghosts, not monsters, just secrecy so complete it becomes a personality. Imagine living in a town where your neighbor can't tell you what they do for work, and you can't tell them either. Where entire facilities have names that sound like coded doors: Y12, K25, S50. 3 different methods, one single goal: a town designed like a machine. At Y12, young workers, many of them women, were trained to watch dials and keep needles centered hour after hour, day after day, without being told what the dials actually meant. They weren't making history in their minds. They were just doing a job. That's the unsettling part. World-changing decisions reduced to routine, like clocking in at a diner. Except the diner is surrounded by fences and armed guards. Then there's the kind of detail that feels too absurd to be real. During the war, the project reportedly borrowed an ocean of silver, thousands upon thousands of tons, because copper was scarce. Silver melted and shaped into parts for massive equipment. Think about that for a second. A town so secret, so urgent, it temporarily turned precious metal into industrial plumbing. And Oak Ridge still wears that shadow. The K25 plant is gone now, but its footprint was enormous. So big that standing where it once stood can feel like staring at the outline of a vanished giant. You're not looking at ruins, you're looking at absence. So the question isn't, is Oak Ridge haunted? The question is, what does it do to a place and to people when an entire city is built around a secret and normal life grows on top of it like grass over concrete? If you moved here, would you feel safer because it's quiet? Or would you feel watched because quiet can also mean contained? And if a town can be erased from public view once, how certain are you it couldn't happen again? Number 9. Adams. Adams is the kind of town you could drive through in a few minutes and never think about again. A quiet stretch of Robertson County, close to the Kentucky line, where the roads feel wider than the crowds and the nights feel a little too still. But Adams has one detail that changes the whole vibe. Right off the highway, there's an official historical marker that basically tells you in polite government language, yeah, this place comes with a story. Because Adams is tied to the Bell Witch, one of Tennessee's most famous legends, a tale that locals have been passing down for more than 2 centuries. It's not the usual haunted house setup with fog machines and jump scares. The creepiness here is smaller, closer, and somehow worse. The idea that your own home could stop feeling like yours. The story centers on the Bell family in the early 1800s. The accounts say it started like a prank of the senses. Strange sounds, knocks in the night, scratching that didn't match any animal. And then, according to the legend, it became something that could speak. Not a shadow in the corner, not a figure at the end of the hall. A voice, a presence that could comment, mock, and interrupt daily life like it had a seat at the dinner table. That's what makes Adams feel different. Most small towns have folklore, sure, but in Adams, the folklore has a location. People point to land, they give directions, and if you keep following those directions, you end up at places like the Bell Witch Cave, a real site that visitors can walk into, where the air gets colder, the light gets thinner, and the walls close in just enough to remind you how easy it is to feel trapped underground. And here's the part that keeps people talking. The legend doesn't need you to believe it. It just needs you to imagine it for 5 seconds. Imagine lying in bed, hearing something move in the next room, and realizing you don't even know what question to ask. Is it a person? Is it an animal? Or is it something that's been here longer than you? Some versions of the story drag famous names into the myth, as if the town wants you to feel like the mystery was too big to ignore. Skeptics will tell you it's folklore, a cultural echo that grew louder with time. Locals will tell you the opposite, and then they'll get quiet in that way people do when they've said enough. So if you ever find yourself on a back road near Adams after dark, and you see that marker on the side of the highway, ask yourself one thing. Would you rather stop for gas, or keep driving and let the night stay behind you? Number 8, Elkmont. Elkmont sits inside the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, and at first glance it doesn't feel scary at all. It feels nostalgic, like the kind of place families used to escape to when summer got too hot and the city got too loud. Trees everywhere, creek sounds in the background, cabins tucked into the woods like they're waiting for someone to come back with a cooler and a deck of cards. And that's exactly why it's creepy, because Elkmont isn't a ruin you can only stare at from behind a fence. In parts of it, you can actually walk through the old resort neighborhood. You can stand on a quiet road and look at cabins that were built roughly a century ago, when this area shifted from a logging camp into a seasonal retreat. For a while, Elkmont was a place for club life and summer routines. People came here to unplug before unplugging was a concept. They fished, they socialized, they treated the Smokies like a private backyard. Then the world changed and the community faded out. There's a section known as Daisytown, a cluster of historic cabins near Jake's Creek. Some structures were restored, some were left to show their age, and that mix is what makes the whole area feel like a paused movie scene. You'll see a cabin that looks cared for, then another one that looks like the forest has been slowly negotiating ownership. It's not dramatic decay, it's quieter than that. It's the unsettling feeling of seeing a normal human place without humans. Elkmont's history has a built-in tension. It belongs to the park now, but it still carries the shape of people's lives. For decades, families stayed here under long-term leases, and when those leases stopped being renewed, the town didn't end the way stories usually end. It didn't burn down, it didn't collapse overnight. It just became emptier, season by season, until the sounds changed. No porch conversations, no footsteps on gravel, just the creek, the wind, and the occasional creak of a cabin settling into silence. Here's the part that hits hard on a human level. When you walk through Elkmont, you're not looking at a distant ghost town across the desert. You're walking through the outline of summer memories that never got a final goodbye. The road still curves the way it did when kids ran down it. The cabins still face the trees, like they're expecting a knock on the door. And the Smokies, beautiful as they are, do not care whether anyone is home. The forest keeps growing either way. So ask yourself this: which is more unsettling? An abandoned town that looks dangerous, or an abandoned town that still looks livable? Because in Elkmont, the scariest thing isn't what you see, it's what you don't. And once you've felt that kind of quiet, the next town on our list won't feel like a story. It'll feel like a warning. Number 7, Petros is the kind of place that feels quiet on purpose. A small community tucked into the Cumberland Plateau where the trees close in, the roads narrow, and the mountains don't just surround you, they seem to lean towards you. And right there, in that hush, sits the reason Petros carries a different kind of chill: brushy Mountain State Penitentiary. This isn't spooky because of folklore. It's spooky because it's real. A fortress-like prison built to hold people in a landscape that already feels like it was designed to keep you from leaving. Brushy opened in 1896, and it wasn't placed here by accident. This region is tied to coal, labor conflict, and a hard chapter in Tennessee history that still echoes through the valleys. The prison rose in the aftermath of tensions around coal mining and systems that treated human bodies like tools. Even if you don't know every detail, you can feel the intention in the location, remote, rugged, and difficult to navigate. So the wilderness isn't scenery here, it's part of the lock. And then there's the structure itself. Early buildings gave way to the heavy stone look people remember, the kind of architecture that makes a place feel older than it is, like a castle built for containment instead of protection. The walls were made from rock quarried on site, which is an unsettling detail if you sit with it long enough. The prison isn't just in the mountain. In a way, it is the mountain, shaped, stacked, and sealed into a human-made cliff. Think about what that does to a town's identity. When your most famous landmark is a penitentiary, every road feels like it's pointing toward the same shadow. You don't need ghost stories when the silhouette of a real institution does the work. The air around places like this always feels different, not because something is floating in the hallway, but because you're standing near a building that was designed to outlast hope. What makes Petros even stranger is what happened after Brushy closed in 2009. The prison didn't disappear. It didn't get erased. It stayed. And starting in recent years, people began walking back inside. By choice. Tours, history visits, curiosity trips. That's a very American kind of eerie. Turning a place built for punishment into a place you buy a ticket to explore. You step through gates that once meant no return. And now they mean welcome. Picture the scene, a quiet mountain road, trees shifting in the wind, stone walls rising out of the valley like they were always there. You're not hearing chains, you're hearing your own footsteps and realizing how loud they are when everything else is still. So here's the question, if a place was built to keep people in, does it ever really stop feeling like a trap, or does it just become a landmark that teaches your imagination where the exits might be? Number 6, Rugby. Rugby doesn't feel creepy because it's broken. It feels creepy because it was built to be perfect. Tucked into the Cumberland Plateau, Rugby was founded in 1880 as an intentional community and utopia designed on paper before it ever existed on the ground. The idea was bold and strangely wholesome. A planned Victorian village where people could live cooperatively, escape class pressure, and start over in a healthier, fairer kind of society. And for a moment, it worked well enough that buildings went up, routines formed, and the place started to look like a real town. But the unease in Rugby comes from what happened next. The dream didn't hold. Legal problems, hard conditions, and a deadly typhoid outbreak helped drain the momentum. By the end of the 1880s, many of the original settlers had left or died, and the new world they came to build quietly slipped into something else. Part historic district, part living museum, part echo. Here's why that hits differently than a typical ghost town. Rugby wasn't abandoned in a dramatic explosion. It didn't collapse into dust. It simply stopped becoming what it promised, and the town still stands there like a postcard that never reached its destination. The strongest symbol is the Thomas Hughes Free Public Library. It was completed in 1882, and it's not a replica or a themed attraction. It's a real 19th century circulating library that survived with its identity intact. Think about that, a small mountain village built as a social experiment, and one of its most enduring features is a quiet room of books. Still there, still recognizable, still holding the shape of people who believed knowledge and community could fix a life. Rugby also has a church that looks almost too beautiful to be real in the middle of the woods. Christ Church, built in the late 1800s, sits with that delicate old world charm that makes you lower your voice without knowing why. Even if you don't believe in anything supernatural, the architecture alone can give you that feeling of stepping into a place where time moves differently. And that's the real creepiness of Rugby. It's a time capsule with a heartbeat. You can visit, you can tour, you can even stay overnight nearby. Yet the village still carries an eerie calm, like it's waiting for the next group of hopeful people to show up and restart the experiment. The trails around it, the trees closing in, the creeks, and the quiet. Everything makes it feel slightly separated from the modern world, like you crossed an invisible line without realizing it. So ask yourself this: if a town was designed to save people, what does it mean when the plan fails, but the place remains? Would you find comfort in a village that still looks gentle and organized? Or would that calm start to feel like a reminder that some dreams don't end? They just go silent. Number 5, Ducktown and Copperhill. If you want a different kind of creepy, not folklore, not whispers in the woods, then you drive to the Copper Basin near Ducktown and Copperhill, because this is the kind of place where the land itself looks like it went through something, and for a long time, it did. This corner of southeastern Tennessee is tied to copper mining and processing that stretched across generations. The basin isn't just a town story, it's a landscape story. Creeks like Davis Mill and North Potato Creek feed into the Ocoee River, and a long section of that river system carried the weight of what happened here. When people say the past leaves scars, Copper Basin is what they mean, literally. Here's the part that makes it unsettling in a way your brain can't shrug off. Historical mining and related operations stripped the area so hard that the region became infamous for bare, reddish ground. Not a spooky aesthetic, a physical change. And according to environmental project records, erosion and waste moved down into the river system in enormous amounts, described as tens of millions of cubic yards. Picture that, not a few polluted puddles. A whole basin bleeding its soil into the water year after year until the river becomes a conveyor belt for the damage. And then there's the strange calm of standing somewhere that once powered an industrial rush. The Bora Bora mine opened in the late 1800s, and today the site is part of a museum and historic area. You can walk the grounds, look at the structures, and it feels almost normal. Until you remember what the place represents. A machine big enough to reshape a valley. A workforce built around extraction. A system that kept going until it couldn't. Mining ended in the late 1980s, and some related industrial production continued much later. The timeline alone tells you this wasn't a quick mistake. It was a long habit. What makes the Copper Basin even more eerie is what came after. The cleanup. This isn't a forgotten wound. Agencies tracked it, monitored it, and pushed major restoration. The kind of restoration that has to deal with acidic soil, stubborn chemistry, and a landscape that doesn't want to grow back easily. Parts of the basin have been reworked and replanted, and the river is monitored so it can support recreation again. On the surface, it looks like a comeback. But standing there, you realize the creepy part isn't a monster. It's the scale. It's the fact that people can change a place this dramatically, then spend decades trying to reverse it, and still never fully erase the memory of what the land looked like at its worst. So when you hear the Ocoee River and see trees returning, ask yourself, how much healing does it take before a place stops feeling haunted by its own history? And if the ground could lose itself once, how sure are you it can't happen again somewhere else? Number 4, Port Royal. Port Royal is one of the strangest kinds of creepy because it doesn't feel like a haunted town. It feels like a town that got erased, but forgot to erase the road. This place sits near the meeting of the Red River and Sulphur Fork, and if you didn't know what you were looking for, you might think it's just a quiet patch of Tennessee woods and water. But Port Royal used to be a real river town, a working place, a stop that mattered. And now what's left is a historic area where one building stands out and the rest of the town is mostly foundations, traces, and silence. That building is the old Masonic Lodge and General Store, built in 1859. It's the kind of structure that makes your brain fill in the missing pieces. You look at it and imagine the rest of Main Street, the voices, the footsteps, the smell of river trade. But when you turn your head, the rest of that world isn't there anymore. It's like the town is present only in outline. And here's where Port Royal gets heavier in a way that sticks with you. In late 1838, this area became the final night in Tennessee for more than 10,000 Cherokee people traveling on the northern route of the Trail of Tears. The road went right through Port Royal. People camped here before crossing into Kentucky. That's not a ghost story, that's a human one. And it changes the air in your chest when you realize you can still walk part of the same path. There's a preserved section of the old roadbed, about 300 yards, sunken and worn, like the ground remembers every step that pressed into it. You can stand there today and look down that shallow trench of history. No special effects, no scary music needed, just the idea that a place can hold an event so large and then slip into quiet so deep that most people drive past without noticing. Port Royal also has a steel truss bridge over Sulphur Fork, built in 1890. It's beautiful in that old engineering way, all angles and rivets. The kind of bridge that looks like it belongs in a black and white photograph. Walking across it feels like stepping into a different century. The water moves under you, the woods don't react, and the stillness feels personal. That's the signature of Port Royal. It isn't a town screaming for attention. It's a town whispering through what's missing. A place where history passed through, left something permanent in the ground, and then moved on. So if you ever visit, ask yourself this: is the creepiest thing a legend in the dark, or a real road that you can still walk, leading straight into the quiet of everything that isn't here anymore? Number 3, Coker Creek. Coker Creek doesn't feel creepy because it's famous for monsters. It feels creepy because it's famous for a temptation. This is a small, unincorporated spot in the mountains, wrapped by the Cherokee National Forest, just a short drive from Tellico Plains. The trees are thick, the roads get narrow, and the air has that clean, quiet pressure that makes you lower your voice without realizing it. And running through all that green is a creek with a reputation that goes back almost 2 centuries. In 1831, placer gold was discovered along Coker Creek. Not the deep mine, hard hat kind of gold. The kind you can chase with a pan, a shovel, and enough hope to make you ignore how far you are from everything. For a stretch of time in the 1800s, people rushed here, washing creek gravel and chasing tiny flashes of metal like they were chasing a new life. Even today, the idea still pulls people in. Gold panning isn't just a hobby here, it's a ritual that survived. And that's the unsettling part. A place doesn't keep a ritual alive unless it has power over people. Picture the scene. You're standing in cold water, hands numb, swirling a pan of sand and stones, watching the heavier bits settle. It's quiet in a way that feels too complete. No traffic, no sirens, just water moving and forest holding its breath. Every time the pan clears, your mind whispers the same thought. Maybe the next one. Maybe the next one. That's how a creek becomes creepy, when it turns patience into obsession. Coker Creek also sits in a corridor of older history. The forest here isn't just scenic, it's layered. Routes like the historic Unicoi Turnpike ran through this region, tying together travel, trade, and movement long before modern highways. So when you follow a road into Coker Creek, it can feel like you're following something older than your GPS, something carved by footsteps and necessity. There's even a modern edge to it. Forest monitoring has noted that recreational gold collecting can noticeably alter habitats in places like this, which is another quiet kind of horror. Even a harmless search for treasure changes the creek itself, little by little, as if the land is paying for human curiosity. And that's why Coker Creek belongs on this list. It's not a town that scares you with legends, it's a place that asks a simple question and dares you to answer it with your body. How far would you go for a chance to find something valuable? Because out here, the creek doesn't promise you gold. It just offers the possibility. And in the deep quiet of the forest, possibility can feel like a hook in your ribs. So if you pull off the road, step into the water, and start panning, listen carefully. Not for ghosts, for your own thoughts. The creek has been working on people for almost 200 years. Why would it stop with you? Number 2, Loyston Norris Lake is one of those Tennessee places that looks like peace. Blue water, wooded hills, boats cutting quiet lines across the surface, the kind of view that makes you breathe slower. But there's a section of this lake some locals still call the Loyston Sea, and once you know why, the water starts to feel different. Because Loyston was a real town, not a legend, not a rumor. A small community in Union County that existed until a national project decided the valley under it would be more useful underwater. When the Tennessee Valley Authority built Norris Dam, the reservoir that formed behind it didn't just flood low land, it swallowed people's lives. Loyston became one of the places that disappeared into the rising water. Here's the detail that makes it genuinely unsettling. This wasn't just moving a few houses and calling it progress. Sources tied to the Norris Dam project describe a massive relocation effort. Thousands of families affected across the region, and thousands of graves moved as well. Let that land in your mind for a second. Imagine being told your home is going under, and then realizing even the dead can't stay where they are. That's not spooky entertainment. That's a kind of quiet trauma that doesn't show up on maps. The creepiest part is how normal it feels now. You can go to Loyston Point today and camp right along the shoreline. You can set up a tent, cook dinner, watch the sunset reflect on the water, and hear nothing but insects and wind through hemlocks. It's beautiful. And that beauty is what makes the story hit harder, because the lake doesn't look like a disaster. It looks like a vacation brochure. But under that calm surface, there used to be roads, yards, daily routines, the distance between a front porch and a neighbor's fence. All of it traded for a reservoir. And if you want a documentary detail that turns this from storytelling into this actually happened, the TVA had photographer Lewis Hine document communities and families affected by projects in this era, including people connected to the Loyston area. The idea that there are real faces behind this, real eyes looking into the camera while their world is being reshaped, makes the whole thing feel heavier than a ghost tale ever could. So when you hear Loyston Sea, don't picture a myth. Picture a town that didn't get abandoned by accident. It got taken by design, and now it's covered by water so clean and inviting that most visitors never even think to ask what's underneath. If you were sitting by that shoreline at night with the lake perfectly still, would you be able to enjoy the quiet? Or would you start imagining the outline of a street below you and wonder what it feels like for a town to vanish without ever really leaving? Number 1, Orme is the kind of place you don't plan to visit. You end up there by mistake because the road keeps narrowing, the hills keep rising, and then suddenly you're inside a valley that feels like it folds shut behind you. This is Orme, tucked into Doran's Cove near the Alabama line, where the landscape does most of the storytelling. The walls of the plateau press in, the creek runs alongside the road, and the town itself feels less like a destination and more like a pocket the world forgot to empty. Here's the detail that makes Orme genuinely unsettling in a way that doesn't need any ghost talk. There's an old wooden depot that says Orme, but there are no train tracks. Let that sit for a second. A train station with no railroad, a landmark built for movement, sitting in a place that now feels defined by stillness. That depot isn't just a quirky photo spot, it's a clue, because Orme didn't grow the way most towns grow. It was built around a single purpose: coal. In the late 1800s, communities formed in this cove because the land could be worked, and the only problem was getting the product out. So they brought the railroad in. A branch line was completed in the early 1900s, stretching more than 10 miles into the cove, an industrial lifeline carved into a tight, isolated valley. And then the purpose faded. As mining slowed and operations declined, the railroad stopped being a lifeline and became dead weight. By the early 1940s, the tracks were pulled up, not abandoned, removed. The rails that once connected Orme to the outside world were literally taken away. and the corridor where they ran eventually became the road people drive today. That's what makes the place feel creepy in the quietest way. You're driving on the ghost of a railroad. The path into town used to be metal in motion, whistle and schedule. Now it's just asphalt, trees, and the sound of your own tires. And Orme itself is tiny. The kind of town where the population is small enough that it can feel like the buildings outnumber the conversations. It's not a tourist town, it's not a cute hidden gym. It's a settlement that shrank down to the essentials and kept going anyway, surrounded by geography that makes leaving feel like the only direction with a future. Picture arriving near dusk. The light drops fast between the hills. The creek goes dark. The depot sits there like a sign for something that doesn't exist anymore. No trains, no crowd, just a name painted on wood, hanging in the air like a question. So here's what Orme does to people. It makes you feel the difference between a place that is quiet and a place that is quiet because its reason for existing disappeared. Would you feel comforted by that kind of isolation? Or would you start wondering what happens when a town loses its connection to the world but stays on the map anyway? Tennessee has no shortage of beautiful small towns, but what makes these 10 creepy isn't just legends or strange headlines, it's the patterns that keep repeating. Places built in secret, places built for a dream that didn't last. Places reshaped by industry, water, or time itself. Some towns feel eerie because something happened there. Others feel eerie because nothing happens anymore, and the silence tells you everything. Now I want to hear from you. Which town on this list would you spend one night in, and which one would you never stop at, even with a full tank of gas? Drop your answer in the comments, and if you know a Tennessee town that deserves a spot in a part 2, name it. If you enjoyed this countdown, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because the next list gets even stranger.